The truth is, I cheated because I was terrified of being boring. Not to others, but to myself. My life with David was a masterpiece of comfortable boredom. 18 years of a partnership built on shared pragmatism. Mortgages, retirement accounts, the annual beach vacation where we read separate books and only spoke to discuss dinner plans. David was a wonderful man, a high school history teacher who graded papers by the light of the living room lamp, content and reliably present. He was everything society told me to value, and I hated it. My work as a freelance book editor only compounded the isolation. I spent my days inside other people's stories, stories of grand passion, sudden ruin, and reckless choices. I was the safe, unseen hand, polishing the excitement out of the prose, while my own life became meticulously flat. The disconnect between my inner landscape and my external reality was an abyss. I felt like a deep-sea creature surviving under immense, crushing pressure. The loneliness wasn't about being alone. It was about being unheard. When I told David I was thinking of going back to school for literature, he nodded, smiled, and asked if that would impact our savings goal for the new roof. His reaction wasn't cruel. It was just perfectly, devastatingly practical. It extinguished the spark of possibility. The first key turning point was the invitation to intensity. It came from a man named Kai. I met him at a professional writing retreat I attended, a desperate attempt to feel creative again. Kai was a travel writer, all sharp edges and beautiful impatience, a man who saw permanence as a trap. We were paired together for a critique session. He ripped apart my safe, predictable writing with surgical precision, then spent 4 hours over cheap wine talking about the terror and joy of a life lived without a net. He didn't make me feel safe. He made me feel visible and, more dangerously, urgent. He told me my life was a novel that needed radical editing. The emotional affair started immediately, fueled by shared intellectual scorn for mediocrity and a frantic mutual need for validation. Texting Kai felt like breathing outside of water. It was a secret, intense education in my own capacity for recklessness. I was instantly addicted to the danger. The way the simplest ping of my phone could shatter the composure I'd spent 2 decades building. The second key turning point was the consummation of recklessness. It happened during the final hours of the retreat, in a borrowed room where the light was thin and the air smelled of salt and paper. I remember looking at Kai's face, seeing the same desperate, beautiful hunger reflected in his eyes, and knowing walking through that door was a point of no return. When we finally fell into each other, it was not an act of tender love. It was an act of defiance. It was noisy, uncontrolled, a physical scream of all the years I had spent whispering. His touch was a harsh reminder of my own body, forgotten beneath layers of comfort and domesticity. It was a brief, violent awakening, a moment of pure, blinding focus, where David and the children and the mortgage simply ceased to exist. I allowed myself to be utterly and completely consumed by the fantasy of being his, of being that version of me. The shame was instantaneous, a cold wave washing over the heat of the moment. I left before sunrise, driving 500 miles home with the phantom weight of his hand on my hip and the scent of foreign desire woven into my hair. I scrubbed my skin raw, but I couldn't wash away the visceral knowledge of my own capacity for deception. The contrast between that raw, electric hour and the quiet, ordered life I returned to was a physical pain. I had found the intensity I craved, and it was toxic. The third key turning point was the unraveling and exposure. The affair didn't continue physically, but the emotional thread was too strong to cut. We kept texting, a low-grade current of shared secrets. I was reckless, stupidly so, because the secret was the only thing keeping the intensity alive. It was my son, Ethan, home from college for the break, who found the evidence. Not on my phone, but on the shared family laptop, where I had stupidly logged into a web-based chat. He was looking for a study guide. Instead, he found a long, intimate exchange detailing my desperate longing and a plan for a future rendezvous. Ethan didn't confront me in a shouting match. He waited until David left for his weekly volunteer shift. He walked into my office, placed the laptop on my desk, and simply said, his voice flat with horror, "I saw the messages, Mom. All of them. I didn't tell Dad yet, but you have to. You have to tell him before I can't look at you anymore." The judgment in his eyes, the total, unadulterated devastation of my child, was a wound deeper than anything David could have inflicted. I had destroyed the one thing I held sacred, the safe, simple world I had built for my children. I confessed everything to David that night. His reaction wasn't rage. It was a quiet, shattering bewilderment. He asked over and over, "But why, Clara? We had a good life. We were safe. Why would you risk our safety?" He didn't understand that the safety was the risk. We are in the process of divorce. It is quiet, meticulous, and emotionally sterile, a perfect reflection of the marriage itself. I got the passion I craved, and it blew up my world. Kai moved on weeks later, sailing off to his next intense experience, proving that I was just a chapter in his reckless story, not the main character in mine. I have my own apartment now. I edit other people's stories in silence, and the guilt is a perpetual, aching presence. I am no longer bored, but I am profoundly, terribly alone. I don't regret the feeling, the brief, blinding vitality of being the woman I knew existed, but I regret the cost. I ruined a good man, devastated my children, and dismantled 3 decades of stability, all for a few moments of intensity. I live with the knowledge that I was the villain in the only story that truly mattered, and there is no editing that out. The question that haunts me now is not why I did it, but whether I deserved the stability I shattered, or if I deserve the wreckage I'm left with.